For me, DIY culture is important because I grew up in Blackpool. So at the time, there was nothing there for anybody who wanted to do anything. It's not like you could form a band and someone's going to put your record out because there was no record labels. You know, in those days you had to go to London and play gigs to record label people if they could bother to come down and see you to get a record deal.
It should be about the music and the meaning behind it, like Pussy Riot. They were playing music because they believed in something, and it's obviously ended up in a bad place because of it, but that's punk as fuck. Like, that's the punkest thing to happen in ages.
Harassed by the police, it's much less than it used to be. We were discussing this on the way out, that every time you went abroad, you get held up at customs at least once on a trip, maybe 3 or 4 times, and now it only happens about once a year. We're wondering whether it's because they don't harass bands anymore or it's because we're older.
We started a new band called Snakes in the Grass. Been going around about 3 months now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we first we got together 3 months ago, and we played did our debut show. We released our debut EP on the 1st of Feb, and we just put it online as a free download. And then we did our debut show in our hometown of Wigan, and that was 9th of Feb. We had a really good turnout. But that night we filmed our first music video as well. So, which we're releasing tomorrow, tomorrow,
1st of March.
1st of March, so we release that online, and then hopefully we try and get it on TV, but it's being sent to Scuzz and Kerrang, so hopefully we just want to take it as far as we can.
Yes,
it's just high energy punk.
I think in any town there's always going to be like some form of subculture. No, there's always going to be people that don't want to follow the latest trends or follow, you know, the latest music, the charts or whatever. They want to just listen to maybe stuff the dads used to listen to, especially nowadays with the bands getting older and the dads' influences. But then new bands that come along and people, and then they all meet together and join bands themselves. And then like from my past, that we made a band and then we met loads of friends through that, and like friends that I still have now.
Of course, growing punk, we didn't want to do that process. We weren't that interested in getting on our knees and grovelling to record labels. So when somebody brought the Buzzcocks Spiral Scratch EP into school, that was amazing, that, because you could see it's so black and white, the sleeve, and it's so homemade looking, so photocopied. You kind of thought, well, we can make our own records, and that was inspirational for us. And the other thing that was inspirational was Mark Perry's Sniffing Glue fanzine, and the idea you could actually write about music yourself and you didn't have to go to the music papers. I mean, I ended up writing the music papers, but I spent a lot of time writing for fanzines, and in effect now, by doing my website, I've kind of gone back to that kind of fanzine world. But the great thing about a website, you got a massive worldwide reach, but it's still very DIY, you know, it doesn't obey any kind of rules. And we were interested in the rules, so that's what drew me to DIY culture. You make music on your own terms. You don't have to be verse, chorus, and make it nice to get on the radio. You make your own records. True alternative culture, and the true meaning of independence, whereas independent now doesn't mean independence anymore. I mean, independence, bands and independent labels have, like, you know, expensive managers, PR people, they have the whole machine behind them. That's okay, you know, that's part of the pop process, but don't call yourself independent because you're not independent.
It's good. I mean, if you're in a band as well, it's like when bands say you sell out because you go really big, but the goal of being in a band to get your music out to more people. I see it like that, but
to have some level of ambition, you know. If
some people disagree, they want to be underground, don't they?
Oh yeah, if music's your only choice in life, then sure you want to try your best to make it work. So.
her scene. She carries an automatic pistol. She ain't got the magazine.
It's just because then you're not being controlled by other people, I suppose. I mean, we wanted it, nobody had, when we started in 76, nobody had kind of an idea of what punk was or what, we wanted to be a rock and roll band, and we wanted to be loud and fast and exciting, you know, because at that time, everybody was playing really sort of laid-back country rock, and it was dead boring, you know. We wanted to go back to having that kind of energy and enthusiasm that bands like, you know, like Chuck Berry had in the 50s and Elvis Presley had in the 50s, and like the Who and the Rolling Stones had in the early 60s, and that had all dissipated. And we wanted to get back to doing that again, and then the punk label came afterwards. And the best way of doing it is to do it yourself. I mean, it always is, you know. If you're not sure and you don't want to follow another trend and start your own, do it yourself. That's what you've got to do.
Yeah, so the best record label started, isn't it?
Yeah. Not just us, it was just weird at the time. It was a whole bunch of other people that you kept meeting in clubs, and you're thinking, hang on, they're all listening to the same bands and wanting to do the same thing as we're doing. And then a whole movement grew up, and then as, you know, 2 or 3 bands became half a dozen. Suddenly it became like, you know, 1,000, you know, overnight almost. And, you know, within 6 months there were just hundreds of bands doing that stuff, so it's great.
And when you hear like alternative radio stations, they're not really alternative. They kind of play jingly jangly indie guitar music, and some of those records are really good, but it's not independent or alternative. It's a bit of a con, really. It's like people buy themselves into these records now thinking, hey, I'm a bit alternative, I own this record, and it's but you're not alternative at all, really. I mean, when you see where the idea of independent alternative culture came from, and it's pretty well captured again by Crass. When they made their own records, they actually deliberately put the records had to be a certain price on the front, which completely fucked up the record shops because they couldn't make a big markup on them. And they were selling 100,000. They'd be selling 100,000 albums, these very political records, making great inspirational statements on them and really brilliant artwork. And to me, that's an independent record. It's made with independent thoughts, independent music. They had no idea, no notion of trying to get on top of the pops at the time, which is the main music show, or trying to get in the radio, or get in the music press. That was not what they were trying to do. They're trying to make music the way it listed, so it'd be a mix of free jazz, classical, and really noisy, avant-garde takes on punk rock. It didn't even fit with punk rock, and to me, that's independent, and that's alternative. I mean, Six Music is a nice radio station, but it's not alternative, and I think the words have become used in so many different ways. They don't have a meaning anymore. You know, I think when the word independent became indie, it sounds like what it is, doesn't it? Indie, schmindy, bindy, bindy. It's like weak, and it sounded, isn't it? So I think it's kind of like that's the con, and it's a great con. It's a great marketing technique to sell you something you think's a bit edgy when it's not edgy at all. I mean, you can see that happen in the punk scene, can't you? I mean, a lot of the kind of major punk bands aren't alternative, really, are they? They go around in huge tour buses, don't they? And 3 tour buses each, and you know, and the light show's coming up the road, and it's like what's the difference between you and a boy band? There is no difference at all, is there? But that doesn't make them wrong or right. It's just the misuse of the words is the wrong part. So they should just say we're just a big rock band.
I think it's hard to avoid being part of some kind of subculture these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I mean, it doesn't matter, especially with the music you take and listen to, really, as well. You're always going to be part of something, you know, whether it's a group of friends, a subculture, and a community, or anything like that.
Music is like the main catalyst, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
That's always the thing that you're gonna have in common with people, and you're gonna kind of.
I mean, we've all got friends and stuff outside the groups, but
Yeah, obviously, but like especially like the way you dress and like your attitudes and stuff are
definitely
really defined by.
Like I met you lot through the music I listen to as well. I find a massive part of me from coming to uni as well. So
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's not like that's what you're all about, but you definitely will fit into a certain group of people. Like you'll be noticeable you'd stand
almost
out
get
from
like
somebody
tagged
else.
from people that aren't.
I think it's just a natural thing. I think it happens even more so these days than it did before, just because there's.
Well, I mean, like 10 years ago we were a lot younger, so we
I
wouldn't
mean,
notice it as much. But
I mean, just in general.
Yeah,
like, I don't know, as you get all these like trends and like scenes and stuff, so like, and people will be pigeonholed even more often than I think they.
Yeah, I suppose it wasn't a massive thing, say 10, 30
yeah.
years ago, but now it is a big thing to be part of a subculture.
It's not even like you're part of like rock or metal or punk these days. It's like you're
it's
a part
even more
of
niche
like
than that.
you're like literally boxed into this avenue. Like, I don't know.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's even a bad thing though.
It's not a bad thing,
because you do get to meet like-minded people. You know, you get to have a laugh with them and things
Yeah.
like that. But there are definitely downsides to it.
The Rancid Let's Go album, that was probably one of my favourite albums of all times because it was really fast, it was really loud, and it was just a great album. Never really heard anyone with the voice of Tim Armstrong before, and you know they were doing really. And I like looked into that, and then I looked into their influences, and it just kind of led on from there really. Yeah, looked at other bands on their record label on like Hellcat Records, and then looked at their influences, and from then on just listened to that.
Time bomb! Wanna make a move, then you better commit. There ain't no reason that we're so fit. Living and dying, stories of the truth.
I think back in the day, before sort of punk, things were all just like a homogenous lump. You know, there was kind of like an underground hippie scene, and then there was everything else. But now you've kind of got soul scenes and reggae scenes and rap scenes and heavy metal bands and rock bands. There's a lot more kind of genres knocking around, I think, today than perhaps there was in days gone by. I mean, in the 60s it was mods and rockers, and that was about it.
Yeah.
Teddy Boys.
See, this is a really weird thing about subcultures, because you think they would change a lot, but they just change subtly. And a lot of people my age will always say, oh, they don't exist anymore, but that's because they're not really looking. And I think it's always important to people, whatever age they are, what shoes got on and how their hair is or whatever. The codes are still there, but you probably can't see them unless you're directly involved in it. But I always say to people, what about all those kind of little rock kids who are in town? You know, that's a subculture, isn't it? And you've got like the Scally kids have their kind of look. You have like indie kids. It's probably a bit more violent in the 80, 81. That was like the youth culture wars when all the little tribes used to fight each other. But really, is that something that we'd really have to bring back? I mean, that wasn't like a particularly great period when people beat you up because of the colour of socks you had on. So, I think things. I always think the more things change, the more they stay the same in a way. There's still people go to gigs, watch music, dress in a certain way because they like certain kinds of bands. Whether it's as important to people, I think people have more. Because of the iPod thing, people have more varied taste now within a subculture. So at the time, and I think initially the early punks would have quite a varied taste in music, but it became a very narrow idea what punk was, and people only like punk and nothing else. But the first wave of punk, which we kind of got into when we were like really young, people were really into reggae as well and other styles of music. And I think that's kind of like massively expanding now, so you can listen to all styles of music, but feel a certain loyalty to a certain type of music. So I like that idea. I like the idea that people kind of spread their kind of tastes out a lot more, but actually still like a genre of music. So they'll go and see a lot of kind of punkish kind of bands or indie kind of bands as well. So I don't think it's massively changed in the last 40 or 50 years. I think there isn't many more different cults that come along. They're just more kind of subdivisions of the ones that were there in the first place.
I think in music there's always an element in most kinds of music for a political element, that people should be able to express themselves in any way that they want. And unfortunately a lot of the newer bands are not doing that as much as perhaps bands did in days gone by, you know, even going back to people like Bob Dylan, you know. But yeah, why not? Let's have politicising as much as you want.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of bands still doing it. I mean,
similar times now as well to the late 70s, you know, similar kind of vibe to it. Yeah.
We need more of it now with this sort of the Simon Cowsers, well, the blanding everything out. The more bands we have coming out doing stuff like that, the better.
Creepers, or like mohawks and like spiked jackets and stuff. It's like on catwalks and stuff.
Definitely. I've seen them coming into like pub work.
It's more acceptable now. But same with tattoos. Tattoos mainstream now. Like a lot more people are heavily tattooed and that. I think it's the same kind of thing.
There was a lot of negative stuff in punk. Yeah, it was a really tough time. It was kind of like now, but with less stuff to do. I mean, it's a recession now, but this recession is kind of weird. It's like there's no money around, everything's getting shut, but everyone's got a computer and everyone's got a telly, and it's like more stuff now. Whereas at that point in time, the telly used to end at 11 o'clock, and it was like you didn't have computers, and it was Britain was a lot. Even though there's probably less money now, Britain was actually grimmer at that time, and it's like the country's having a nervous breakdown. I always thought. And punk was a reaction to that nervous breakdown. There's a massive unleashing of energy, but it affected a lot of people in very different ways. So some people it was a very positive, empowering thing, and it gave them a life, and it gave them an idea of creating their own stuff, you know, the DIY culture, etc. But for some other people, it affected them in a very negative kind of way, and there's a lot of right-wing stuff mixing with punk. Because punk's really odd, it's kind of a real mixture of like left-wing idealism and kind of right-wing negativity, all kind of mixed together. Not like everybody has all those kind of traits. But in the same room, you'd have all people completely different ideas, and there's an unleashing of the energy, and everybody got really totally into their ideas, whether they were good or bad. So that was there as well. I'm sure it probably ruined a lot of people's lives. You know, like it probably got a lot of people into like drugs they shouldn't have got into, and messed them up and things. But it also gave a lot of people an opportunity to escape the drudgery of life as well. You know, for some people, if you look back on it, everything before punk seemed very monochrome, and after punk it seemed very colour. I mean, that's always a trick of the mind, because there's a lot of great culture before punk, loads of great culture, but punk gave you the opportunity to actually join in with that culture. And if you used punk in that way, it was a very powerful, empowering thing. But if you used it in another way, it could actually be very detrimental, destructive. But it opened up the space, and I think the most important thing about punk was it created space, it created an empowerment, and I think that maybe in the end is more important than the music.
Vivienne Westwood was all about, when she started out, she took punk and turned it into high-end fashion, and then there's always going to be copycats of that make it available to like the high street stuff.
I'd agree, but it was big in the fashion world, but I wouldn't say it was big in the sort of mainstream sort of world. I mean, now it's got a lot bigger, especially with there's like the grunge fashion now as well, which has come back after about 20 years, and it's
Tumblr.
Yeah, Tumblr hasn't helped at all, because people obviously see all these posts and stuff about it and think it's really, really good. And I will admit, some of it doesn't look too bad, but it's when you get a lot of the younger people dressing like it, and it's, you know, the really short shorts and things like that.
What was it recently? Like I think it was a Slayer t-shirt in Topshop or something like that, and like everybody was kicking off because it had the eagle that the Nazis use, that has been a long time Slayer logo, and it had that on a Topshop t-shirt, and like all these kids walking around. Right. Well, I don't think people necessarily kicked off about it, but I don't think they understood who Slayer were, the connotations behind that particular image, and they were just like going to Topshop being like, yes,
because it's in Topshop, it's really fashionable,
and it's kind of like rock and roll. It's like it started with all that,
it's
the Rolling Stones and the Nirvana and shit like that.
It's not very good because they're not informed about the bands, and it does make them look really, really stupid.
Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, those bands own, or at least their management, they own that trademark and they own those rights. So they must have allowed, you know, Topshop to be able to reproduce those images and be like, right, that's cool. Like,
so at the end of the day, it's just about making money.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's like the least punk thing ever, to be completely kind of selling out your own image just to make a bit of money off some kids that don't realise and have never listened to the band. They're not buying it for the right reasons.
It does water down the whole the image and the band
punk
itself.
Ethic. Sex Pistols did it. Sex Pistols had a shitload of like Diamante over all their.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones did, but not like that.
That was a Pistols version as well. And like that's surely completely against what
it does go against everything punk stands for.
The punk ethic. They're generally seen as like big figurehead in the original punk community.
In my old band, it was more like 70s influenced band, and I had the mullet, like Iggy Pop mullet and everything. But now, like, I just decided I'm into all different. I still like that style, but now I wanted like the slick back and that. I've been brought up with all different styles. I mean, my dad's like a rockabilly. He throughout since he was 14. He's had a quiff and like the whole rockabilly style. But I guess mine has changed. You've had a more.
No.
I think it all goes hand in hand. Some people don't think it.
You grow up as well. You progress as a person. So it's maturity.
It's good to have change every now and then.
I think the difference of punk made in culture, it's so hard to, again, it's really hard to define it. I mean, for a small amount of people, and there was only a very small amount of people into it, and I think this kind of weird thing when people look back and they do they have a film and they show punks and they always have Mohicans and things, but nobody had a Mohicans about 1979. The punks didn't look that punky either. So it wasn't like everybody was into punk, it was like a few people. In my school was 2 of us into punk and no one else, whereas probably if I went back to my school now, there'd probably be about 20 people into like the modern version of punk. So it made a massive difference to a very small amount of people, but that very small amount of people also made a very big difference in culture. So you can argue that most kind of facets of modern culture are tainted or somehow have the DNA of punk implanted in them. There is a really good argument, I like this argument, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but if you look at Manchester City Centre, you could argue in a weird way that was kind of revolutionised by the impact of punk. So if you look at the impact of punk had on people like, say, Tony Wilson and Factory Records and the Hacienda, and then the way that every building now looks like a version of the Hacienda, that kind of design ethic, which kind of came out of the space that was created by punk. So it wasn't directly people wearing safety pins and playing loud, fast music. It's kind of these weird other influences you get. And I've got to know a lot of MPs in the last few years, and it's weird how many of them are massive fans of The Clash, and they were inspired to get into the political process by punk as well. So its impact is kind of, it's everywhere yet nowhere, I always think. It's like, you walk down the street, it's quite weird. Last year, you see loads of people wearing these kind of shoes again. And these weren't invented by punk, but they were popularised for their second period of popularity in the punk period. So you kind of get punk styles mixed in with loads of other styles, and people wear punk styles or have kind of punk kind of ideas that even know where they came from. And I like that idea as well. I like the way that you can implant culture with these ideas, and they're very strong when they come in, but they kind of float off into different places. So again, it's kind of everywhere and yet nowhere at the same time. But you could argue that about all youth cultures, couldn't you? You could say the hippie culture is kind of pervaded everywhere. You go to people's houses and they have like a little Buddha in the corner, and they've got that not because they have any interest, well, not a massive interest in Eastern mysticism, but it's sort of a vaguely trendy thing that got vaguely trendy in the 60s. So you can see that floating about, or you can see a veneer of acid house's influence on things as well. So I think it didn't turn everybody into punks, but it kind of implanted ideas and styles that kind of sort of become so mainstream you can't even see them now.
I think everyone kind of blends in, and whatever you want to wear, you get heavy metal kids come to our gigs, and you get straight kids and all sorts. It's just
there's no dress code.
No, it's be original, create your own look.
Well, that was the whole idea.
Yeah.
Not follow other people's ideas. To just create yourself.
Do it yourself.
That's just because I think it became part of, if you like that type of music, you like anything really. If you went rambling, you dress like a rambler. You kind of like get stuck into a kind of fashion, because these are the people that they influence you, and that's who you look up to.
I think you're only as much of a victim as you allow yourself to be. So like if you do buy into again, especially with music, if you buy into like needing the latest trend, needing like the clothes that represent that trend, and you feel like you're left out. If you don't have that, then of course you're a victim of it, even if it's self-inflicted. But if you don't really mind yourself, if you're cool with how you look or how you dress in your own way, then you can kind of avoid the tactics that they'd use.
Punk attitude is carried on into like we were saying, heavy metal bands and rap bands. The attitude is not confined to the one type of music. It's gone right across the board.
Yeah.
I think.
You know, his rap band and expressing lots of
Swearing
stuff,
and all kinds of stuff, you know.
which, you know, in 60 soul music, they were
Wouldn't have
pretty
done.
much Moon and June lyrics, and there was a certain amount of that, you know, with people like Marvin Gaye writing songs, but now it's far more broad-based. It's good.
Punk has a lifetime. You're only going to be able to be this angry kid for so long before you eventually be like, right, okay.
Not necessarily. There's still people doing it these
There's
days.
still people doing it, but they kind of just look like sad old
I guess,
bastards.
they
I
haven't really
think.
grown up, have they?
No, and like fair play to them. If they're still pissed off about something, then their opinions should be voiced. But if you grow out of it, then there's no reason to carry on just posing as the. If you're annoyed at something, then fair enough. But if you've grown out of it, then why would you carry on being a punk?
Good point.
Which is why Pill started, because he was over it. Punk died, and then Johnny Rotten started up Public Image Limited, which was his post-punk band.
I don't know then.
Yeah, like almost immediately after Pistols died, he started Pill, which was post-punk, which was like far more chilled out, and still had like political, meaningful lyrics, but you can't carry on hating and being an anarchist forever, I guess.
I disagree.
Well, if you tell people to expect everything but give them nothing, eventually they're just going to grab all the stuff they feel like they're owed, aren't they? So they were kind of capitalist riots, but they were inevitable capitalist riots, weren't they? I think every now and then people see through the contrary, don't they? But there was no political agenda to them. It was just basically you were told, you know, if you have a different pair of training shoes every day, you're really cool, but you can only afford one pair, and everyone goes to town. I thought in a weird way, it's like Manchester City Centre's so posh now that it kind of almost excludes people who live about a mile away or just over there, and it's not. They're probably going to town, little gang of 4 mates, and as soon as they go to shop, the security follow them around, and they're probably not allowed into hard places in town. And I was reading some stuff about it, and people saying, you know, we're in town that night, and no one could stop us, and it is the best feeling in the world, you know, when the cops are running away and you own the town. It's not a good thing, is it? Because, you know, a lot of bad things happen right. So although they weren't quite as heavy as what they made out, I was in town that night, and it wasn't like thousands of people running around. It was just like isolated packs of people basically leaving town with loads of free stuff shoved under their arms and things. So you can't really use them as a political metaphor. You know, like the riots in '81, which again, probably very similar. You know, this is quite funny actually. There's a lot of people my age were going, they don't like have riots like they did in the old days. It's funny when people get to an age when you start looking back nostalgically at things. But I was thinking the riots in the old days are quite similar in a way. It was just a lot of people who just got really fed up and start smashing stuff because it's a rush. It's a few hours of being completely free, and it's a shame that being completely free can only be smashing somebody else's shop up who's got no money. But it's the only time that you're not getting the drudgery goes and you're completely free. And there's not many spaces you can be free in our culture. You think you're free, but you're not. You're always like trapped somewhere. So for about a couple of hours there was this kind of feeling of complete anarchy. But it's a negative anarchy. But riots are always like that. And even if you start a riot off the best intentions, if you start to riot off to get rid of this tawdry government we got now, it would go wrong in about an hour. It would just turn to people smashing things up and the riot police piling it. Everyone fights the police fight everyone else. It's like when you see the marches in London, there's always like, it quickly goes to the bit at the edge where the anarchists turn up and fight the cops, and that's the bit the camera zoom in on, and the whole idea of it gets forgotten about, and it's just like, and the hardcore, the cops are up for a bit of a fight, they like a fight, and so the anarchists, you think, you're actually not much different in this context, you're both down for a big scrap really, aren't you? And the original idea of it gets kind of washed away.
And the aftermath is still traumatic. In Manchester and Salford, 20 police officers were injured. 155 fires were started. At 4 of them, fire crews were attacked and had to withdraw. 7 fire engines were damaged with bricks, and 100 shops and premises were looted and smashed up. The 47 charges included recklessly endangering life, assaulting a police officer, burglary and criminal damage. Mancunians could not believe the appalling scenes of violence and wanton destruction in their much-loved city, and neither could the rest of us. The debate is still raging about why the riots happened and why these criminals relished the destruction. The senior police officer in charge of the video evidence of the attacks on the Arndale Centre called the perpetrators feral rats.
People trade in the media. Oh,
I haven't seen it myself.
well, it's difficult to judge because if you only read what's in the media and you're not there, you can't compare with what actually happened with what you read about. I think probably in the main it's been exaggerated to a degree, and they loved the fact that they managed to get, was it Dave Gilmour's son arrested and all that stuff, because he was acting like a twerp. But it's really hard to judge how it's portrayed in the media. You know, students writing now and protesting now, I mean, they don't write much now. You compare it to the 60s, it was far more extreme. There was a lot more violence, cars burnt and things
Horses turned over,
yeah. I mean, you know, especially in Paris, the student riots in Paris and in America were more extreme. I mean, you know, 4 kids got shot dead in Kent University in Ohio, just for, you know, protesting against the Vietnam War. So these days I think that things aren't as extreme as they perhaps used to be, but you still need to express yourself, and that's good.